Greetings, everyone. From all of us here at PURC, we hope that this day finds you and yours happy and healthy and safe wherever you are. Today, in our next installment of Next Practices Live on PURC, we go back to the electricity sector. And specifically, we're going to be looking at the Caribbean. And we're lucky to be joined today by the Deputy Director General of the OUR, the Office of Utility Regulation in Jamaica, Cedric Wilson. And Cedric is going to be talking about some of the things that the OUR is seeing in Jamaica, and some of the things that the OUR and the utilities there are doing in dealing with the current crisis, and what some of those longer range impacts might be for Jamaica, the Caribbean, and for the electricity sector in general. So thank you very much. Cedric, what I'd like to do is just kind of start out with a little bit of, so what is the OUR hearing from the people of Jamaica?
Well, first of all, let me say thanks, Ed, for this opportunity to be sharing in this time of crisis. But Jamaica, like everywhere else, there is hysteria about this problem. But in general, when it comes to utility, people are still interested in getting electricity, good quality of service. People are still interested in water. We are a multi-sector. People are now more than ever interested in good telecom services. So people expect, even with all of the crisis and with all of the anxiety around, to be getting top quality service. That is our experience here.
Okay. Are there specific challenges that people are facing, during this time of crisis that is a little bit different from some of the normal types of things that the OUR sees?
Yes, there are a number of differences. Well, for one, when you think about electricity, what we are seeing is that there is a reduction in demand on the commercial and industrial side, being a country with a fair amount of tourism activities. And on the residential side, because people are staying at home to avoid contact, we are seeing growth in terms of demand in that area. But the net effect is really a reduction in the demand for electricity.
So with this change in the way people are consuming electricity and the overall reduction, what are some of the things that the OUR is hearing from JPS, the primary distribution utility and production utility on Jamaica?
Well, we are hearing several things. First of all, there's a concern about the demand. As you know, electricity companies make revenue and make profit based on the volume of sales. That is one thing. The second thing there seem to be concerned about is customers' ability to pay, because some people are losing their jobs because of this coronavirus pandemic. And so there's that concern about their capacity, JPS's capacity to collect. And there's also a third concern. We are dependent on imported fuel. We have perhaps about 13% of our generation explained by renewable energy, but 87% is dependent on fossil fuel. So therefore, the utility is concerned about their ability to get foreign exchange, given that there will be less inflows, particularly as a result of what is happening to the tourism sector, as well as I would expect later on remittances, which is significant in Jamaica. So those are the three areas I think of concern from the utility.
At the OUR, have there been, we've already talked about briefly some of the concerns of the customers, some of the concerns from the electric utility. Has OUR been involved in any type of collaborative arrangements? What role has, for example, the government played in some of this interaction between the regulator, the utility, and the customers?
Well, we have been involved in various degrees with the government, with the utility, with customers. And a lot of that has arisen out of initiatives that JPS has taken. There are three types of initiatives, I would say, that we have seen. There is what I would call fiscal advocacy on the part of JPS. There is also direct company action by JPS. And there is also a request from JPS, the utility, for regulatory adjustment. Let me try to explain what these three types of initiatives from the utility involves really. The first one, when we talk about fiscal advocacy, we have what is called a general consumption tax on customer bills. And what JPS has asked is that this tax, which is currently 15%, is removed from all customer bills. The second is that there is what we call a special consumption tax, which is on fuel. And the JPS has also asked the government to remove this special consumption tax from off the fuel. And so what the Ministry of Energy has asked us to do is to look at it and see, do the necessary analysis to see whether or not it would be significant to customers and what kind of revenue impact it would have on them. So there is that collaboration on the government side. With respect to the direct action on the part of JPS, what they have done is they have tried to focus on the customers that are most vulnerable. And these customers would be the disabled customers and the elderly customers. And what they have developed some program to distribute care packages to those customers, as well as in some instances provide bill payment assistance. From what I understand, that bill payment assistance would be somewhere in the region of 5,000 Jamaican dollars, which is approximately 36 US dollars. And it is a one-off arrangement. And they have also promised TED to have a no disconnection policy for these vulnerable customers, at least for April and for May. And so those are the things that are direct action. We have only reacted positively to it because we think it's a positive move. It will help some people. And the final thing is the question of regulatory adjustments. And what we have in place is what we call an electricity disaster fund that has been in place since 2004. And what that fund does is, because it is very difficult to get insurance in the Caribbean for disasters, given our vulnerability to hurricanes and that kind of things, tropical cyclones, we have developed our own fund. And right now the fund is quite considerable. But the rules of the fund says that these funds are only applicable to the transmission and distribution line. But what the electric utility has done, they have applied for support from that fund for the COVID-19 situation, because they are going to expect cash flow issues. So they are asking for a loan from the fund. So it is something that we are now considering. So we have seen initiatives in terms of requests to the government, relief for the elderly and the disabled, and a review of the rules concerning some regulatory processes that we have.
So let me take you back to that, the emergency loans from the electricity disaster fund. Are the rules surrounding that fund, are those statutory from the government, or do those rules originate with the OUR? What I'm trying to get at here is, does the OUR unilaterally have the authority to change the rules under which money can be dispersed or loaned from the fund, or is this something that the government has to be involved in?
That's a very interesting question, Ted. But the rules of the fund are governed by the interaction between JPS and the OUR. So the rules of the fund can be changed with an agreement between the OUR and JPS. Normally, those rules are to be reviewed every 2 or 3 years, but the rules allow for this kind of emergency situation where you can look at the rules and make the necessary adjustments. So we have to be going through that process. So it makes it less complicated than when you have the government involved.
Yeah, definitely. And I want to stress, if there's anything, if I ask a question that for whatever reason you can't discuss because it's a subject of an ongoing commission business, please don't hesitate to tell me, yeah, interesting question, we're working through it, I can't say anything about it. That's perfectly all right. We understand the constraints that you are under. Okay, let's go back to now those first, where the company asked about the general consumption tax and the special consumption tax. You said that the OUR was analyzing that for the government. Has that analysis been completed? And if so, what did you find out?
Yes, we did our analysis and we observed a number of things. First, what we observed is that because this tax is only applicable to residential customers who consume in excess of 150 kilowatt hours per month, what we observe is that it would only affect the top 35% of consumers. So 65% of customers would not benefit one way or the other because in the first instance, they weren't paying this tax. All right, that is the first thing. So our conclusion on this matter is that we don't think it would benefit the people who would most be affected. The people at the lower level of the society, social income, the income bracket in our society. So we thought a more targeted approach on the part of the government would be much better. Secondly, when we look at the commercial and industrial customers, while they are asked to pay the general consumption tax on all their kilowatt hours, what we know is that these tax can be reclaimed when they submit their income tax claim at the end of the year. So they can get it back. So we didn't see the GCT as the most effective vehicle for affecting people who are most affected by the coronavirus. So that is one thing. The SET is another thing again. While import taxes in general tend to send up the price of a commodity, and it makes it less attractive. What has happened in recent time is that there has been a big shift from the consumption of fuels in terms of heavy fuel oil and ADO, automotive diesel oil, to natural gas. In fact, about 70% of our generation is from natural gas now. And so what we see is that the special consumption tax on natural gas is very small. So if we were in the regime in which the dominant fuel was the liquid fuels, it would be different from, so we don't see the SET having a major impact on the price of electricity. So basically that is our conclusion, that we don't see this fiscal request as something that will have the biggest impact.
Okay, thank you. Now, one of the things that is a little bit different about JPS in Jamaica when you consider electric utilities globally is that JPS, since 2016, 2017, is under a revenue cap regime for their tariff setting process. So any shortfall in revenue this year, or anything below the cap, effectively will lead to a price adjustment for the following year once that's all been resolved. You mentioned before that the consumers right now are struggling with some of this ability to pay as they're going forward. Is this the potential for prices to increase next year when the revenue cap is basically trued up? Is that something that the OUR is kind of looking towards in the future, or is most of your concern dealing with the crisis right now?
Well, that's a very intricate and complicated issue, because I tell you why. Revenue decoupling is the regime that we operate on just now, as you correctly said. And what has been happening over the last 3 years of this revenue cap regime is that the price of electricity in US dollar terms have actually gone down, because what has happened is that the targeted revenue is less than what actually came about. And so that has caused downward pressure on the price of electricity. But with what is happening now, as you correctly alluded to, what we'll be seeing is price increases. And what makes it even more difficult is that we are in the midst of a rate review just now. And that rate review will see we take in account for investments for the next 5 years. So I suspect that there might be some adjustments. The question is, how do you deal with it? Because you're setting a 5-year tariff, so if there is scope for you to make adjustments to the tariff without creating any price shocks, particularly in the context of what is happening now with COVID. So this is a real complicated situation. I think you can give me another interview in another 3-4 months' time, and I can say something more definitively, Ted.
No, well, thank you for sharing what you can. We really appreciate that. So throughout this process, what have you seen as some of the biggest challenges that OUR as an organization has faced trying to worry about or address the things that the people are worried about, the things that the government's worried about, the things that JPS might be worried about. What have been some of the challenges for OUR?
I think like everybody else, this new dispensation in terms of work creates a bit of a challenge. You know, we are accustomed to working together, and now everybody is working separately most of the times. And what we notice is that whenever you have a Zoom meeting or one of those kind of internet meeting, it takes twice as long for whatever reason. I don't know if that is your experience. So those are some of the challenges, the physical challenges, doing all of the analysis, analyses that are necessary. Furthermore, we find a number of requests coming from the utilities in general, requests about requests for force majeure for the general standards. These are the things that we find coming on. We had a situation last week where one of the IPPs, they had a COVID case on the plant, the generation plant, and it had to be locked down. So we had to do some analysis to see whether or not there might be load shedding. And these are the things that pop up from time to time, because in these matters, what we discover is that everything is connected to everything, and one thing affects another, and so on. So the challenges of working, the challenges of dealing with the special requests from the utilities. We also find people, especially in the telecom sector, are complaining about the quality of the service that they're having, because more people are using the internet from home. More people are trying to get access to these kinds of service. So we have been having all of these kinds of complaints.
Okay, let's stick with quality of service for a second. You talked a little bit about the telecom folks. We haven't really talked too much about, we've been focused more on price for electricity. From the standpoint of the electric utilities, from the water utilities, they've had to change now some of the ways that they are doing business. I know that JPS has the capacity to read some of the meters remotely, but I know that you don't have those systems everywhere. So have there been some challenges to quality of service, to access to service for electricity and water companies as a result of some of the measures that we're putting in place in order to mitigate the potential spread of the coronavirus?
Well, the whole question of access to meters and sending workmen out from utilities to read meters, that is a challenge, particularly in the water sector. For electricity, there is perhaps, I can't say exactly what percentage, but there are smart meters that can be read remotely. But so one of the things that we have seen from the Water Commission, NWC, is that they are asking for a waiver on their standards for reading meters. We have a standard that you should not send customers 2 consecutive bills that are estimated. So what we are contemplating and we are inclined to do is to waive that guaranteed standard, because we understand the challenges of reading meters in this time. Another thing I should say is that there are some customers, we are in the drought season right now, where water is not in abundance. So some customers are concerned about getting water, because under normal circumstances, you'd have lockoffs and stuff. So they are concerned about getting water, given that hands need to be washed, and you have to pay particular attention to hygiene at this time. I think the Water Commission is really making an effort to ensure that people have water, even given the levels of the reservoirs that we have right now.
Okay. I'm going to take a pause on some of my questions because we've got a question in the queue that I want to address. The question asks, have falling oil prices impacted electricity charges in any significant way yet? And then are there plans to work with customers to have them evolve from more the consumer aspect to a responsible user of the products aspect? What has the OUR done in that respect?
Well, one other thing about fuel prices, fuel costs are passed through to customers. And so we would expect falling oil prices, not immediately. There is usually a lag between when the utility purchases and when it uses, but we would expect to see some impact on the bill. But I don't think that impact will be very significant, primarily because the shift from the use of heavy fuel oil and ADO to the use of natural gas, because what we encounter in terms of natural gas is about 70% of the price that we pay for natural gas is for the infrastructure, for shipping it, and for the pipelines in. So even though I would expect natural gas to fall incrementally, that impact would not be significant because of the proportion of fixed costs that is in the price. So that is one thing. In terms of customers becoming more responsible users, I think we have been seeing that over the last couple of years. And one of the analyses that we did over the last couple of months indicate that even though the demand for electricity has been growing, the average use per customer has been falling. So I think with the new gadgets, with LEDs, with more efficient appliances, customers are taking advantage of these new technologies in order to bring their bill down.
So have you seen this this particular instance where customers are being smarter about the way they're consuming? Is this something that the OUR made efforts to make them more aware, or JPS to make them more aware, the government, or have consumers been doing this pretty much on their own?
To a large extent, customers have been pretty much doing this on their own. I think that exists. I think there might be another concern though with this fall in economic activities, is that customers might have in meeting their bill given the loss of income. We might have challenges with more system losses, more theft of electricity. That is a possibility, which we have to keep focused on as well.
Okay, well that brings up something else because you already talked about the OUR going through and relaxing some of the or at least one of the guaranteed standards that you have in place for estimated bills. And I don't want to preempt, anything that might come up at the commission, but you also have a target in place for system losses. Do you think that is going to be impacted by some of the things that you're seeing right now?
That's a possibility. I tell you, one of the things that has happened, we are currently reviewing JPS's rate application, as I mentioned before. Right. And one of the things we were doing is we were looking at this 5-year demand forecast. And when we look at it, we say, wow, with Corona, things have changed dramatically. So we can't make any presumptions. So we say, we send it back to JPS and say, listen, given all of what is happening, tell us what you think will be the new forecast given the advent of COVID-19. And in our discussion with them, they were saying, listen, we don't have a clue. We don't know where exactly this is going. We don't know where the point of inflection will be. We don't know where or when things will start changing. So it's a similar thing when it comes to losses. We don't know exactly, but we're trying to figure this thing out as we go. It is a bit like jazz somewhat, you know. You make it up as you go along. This is what is happening now when it comes to some aspect of the planning. We're trying to figure this out because, interestingly, years ago, Donald Rumsfeld, the defense secretary in the US, said that, you know, there are known knowns, there are known unknowns, and there are unknown unknowns. This definitely is an unknown unknown, and we are trying to, which baffles the science that we have, and we are trying to figure all of this thing out.
Well, yeah, to paraphrase another one of his quotes, you don't adapt based on the information that you wish you had. You adapt based on the information that you actually do have, and that's certainly a great example of doing that. Okay, we know that we're undergoing a lot of changes in response to this crisis, but we also know, maybe not the time, but we know that at some point the crisis will pass. Do you see this crisis and some of the things that you've seen from the standpoint of the OUR? Do you see Jamaica, the people, the government, the OUR, JPS being changed in any way once the crisis, I don't want to say over, but once the crisis is mitigated, managed, whatever the outcome is?
Yeah, definitely. What we are going through right now is some kind of metamorphosis. You know, we are being transformed in this process. And for one, I mentioned before, we'll have to look at the rules relating to expenditure on disaster and the disaster fund. We think we'll have to look at things like reserve margins, given that we are an island economy, and what happens at one plant in the case of a pandemic like this can affect your overall generation, because you might just have to take a plant off the line in order to sanitize the equipment that is around for a couple of days. So we'll have to look at things like the reserve requirement in the future. Also, this is happening not just only in the electricity sector and in the utility services, but how people work, that is another thing. The question is, do we need to bring everybody in the office to work? Those are things that we are looking at. So this, I think, will bring about some transformations. And the thing about these things, transformation is never usually as big as people expect them to be. But the fact of the matter is, we'll never ever go back to where we were.
Okay, before we open things up for participation from the group, I have one more question that came up in the queue. And asking, have the telcos requested any relief from the government, such as waiver or delayed payments of any taxes? And if so, what has been the response?
Well, frankly, I'm not the authority on telecom matters, but to the best of my knowledge, they have not requested any waiver on taxes.
Okay. Oh, and then another question. What role, also from the Caribbean, what role can renewables play in crises like these? And can this crisis serve as a springboard to increase the role of renewable generation?
I certainly think that independent of the crisis, renewable is the way forward for electric utilities. From a number of perspectives, from the point of view of the environment, from the point of view of being an island, if you're in an island economy, or if you belong to an economy that doesn't produce gas or oil, from a foreign exchange balance of payment, it is the way to go forward. But I think what this might do for some countries is to emphasize the need to move more quickly to renewable resources. And that is what I think will happen as a result of this crisis. So I think it's a very good question. It will highlight the need to use more renewable resources in the future.
Okay, that's great. Rebecca, I've got a message from Answered Hewitt saying that he can actually address the telecom question. So why don't can we put him up and let him answer the question?
Are you there, Answered?
I'm here.
Excellent. If you like, you can share your video, but that's certainly not required.
Okay. Right. So I was saying that the telecos, we have seen a couple of letters from the telecos to the government seeking some relief, perhaps payments on payments of spectrum fees. They have also mentioned regulatory fees, which is a little puzzle to us because if they want, if there is to be relief on regulatory fees, certainly that would have to be addressed to the OUR. They have also indicated to the government that there are things that can be done to allow even temporary access to the spectrum that will allow them to serve or better serve the surge in demand that you have had resulting from COVID and the necessity for people to work from home, et cetera, et cetera. So I think the government is still working through their response to that. As regard regulatory fees, the OUR, like everybody else, is looking at its own budget to see the extent to which they're going to have to be cuts, there are going to have to be savings. And to the extent that we do that, we will, whatever is saved will need to be passed on to the regulated entities because they fund our work. And to the extent that we are able to reduce our budget, it should represent savings to them.
Thank you. Thanks a lot for being willing to chime in there. That was that's very helpful. Thank you, sir. Okay, Rebecca, it looks like we've got I've got a question from Alfred and from Sandra. Maybe since we're now into more of the participatory part, do either Alfred or Sandra want to just ask the question?
Sure. So, and I just also, before we get to their two questions, I'll, what we'll do is we would ask for you to raise your hand. And so that will put you in a queue so we know that you want to share comments or any additional questions that you have. So this is an opportunity for you to maybe share a little bit what you're doing in your organization. And in order to raise your hand, if you kind of move your cursor around in the screen, that will pop up a toolbar, and you're going to look out for, at the bottom, a participant tab, and that will open up a new window to your right, and that will give you the option at the bottom to raise your hand. If you're working from a smartphone or from a tablet, you might find that toolbar at the top of your screen. But I would ask, I guess, Alfred first. Alfred, are you there? I'm going to unmute you. Are you there, Alfred?
Yes, sure, I am.
Would you like to share your question with the audience and anything else you'd like to share with us?
All right, thank you very much, Rebecca. You're doing tremendous job to let us share, more things, and thanks to Ted and Cedric for the wonderful insights you're giving us. Well, my question is, I presume during this kind of unwatered waters, just to quote Dr. Jameson, I presume the regulator, the government, and GPS do meet quite often, virtually indeed. So how often they meet to work out some adaptive measures to a number of situations? Does it happen? Thank you very much. That was my question. Thank you.
Thanks, Alfred.
Thank you very much, Alfred. Actually, we have not had any virtual meeting with all three of us. We have had, the OUR have had meetings with JPS virtually. We have had meetings with the government virtually. But there has been, and I would suspect that the government perhaps would have had discussions with JPS virtually. But we have never ever had a meeting with all three of us. And I think for us it is important because we consider ourselves, even in the midst of this crisis, even given the fact that there ought to be some kind of collective and collaborative approach to all of this, we still consider ourselves to be acting independently. And we believe that our decision should not be influenced in any way, except by what is necessary, what is prudent, what is judicious at this time. So basically that is how we have operated. There might be, that doesn't rule out the fact that there might be an occasion later on that might warrant us meeting in a virtual setting with all three players involved.
Right.
Sandra, are you there? I'm not sure if Sandra would prefer us to read her question or if maybe she wants to provide a little bit more. Sandra, are you there?
Yes, I am. I'm here and I can show my face.
Welcome.
Welcome, and it's a pleasure being part of this discussion. One of the questions I wanted to ask Cedric, because we in Barbados, I'm from the Barbados Fair Trading Commission, we are also looking at a similar situation, and you said that you got this request from JPS, but you're not, and then Answered came in and talked about what is happening with the telecom sector. Now, as the regulator, if you would do something for one sector, would you want to not apply it to all the sectors that you regulate, the water sector, the telecommunications sector? Would you have to wait for them to ask the question? That's what I want to know. Thank you.
Well, if I should respond to this, the level of technology, the mode of operandus, it is different for each sector. And what we have done is that we allow each sector to apply and indicate what specific standards they would want to be waived at this time, rather than to give a blanket waiver to all of the sectors. We haven't done, but I should say though that there are some it might be it might not be a bad thing to apply to approach things that way, but we think in our particular case it makes sense that you do it on a case-by-case basis.
Okay, thank you.
No, thank you, Sandra. Okay, Rebecca, I know you can see the queue. Do we have other hands up?
Yeah, we don't have anybody else in the queue right now, so I think maybe we might have answered everyone's questions. I would just say maybe we can just give a short little, just one more prompt here for questions. I don't know if you have anything else for.
I do. I have
Okay.
a closing question for
Awesome.
For Cedric before we go. But certainly, if anybody has any last minute questions, now's the time to get them in. But my question for you, Cedric, would be for you, and this can either be you personally or you as Deputy DG at OUR. What has been the one thing that you have learned from all of this? And I'm keeping that general on purpose. It can be related to the utility sector. It can be related to the way you do your job. It can be related to the way people are interacting with each other, whatever. The biggest kind of your takeaway from the response you've seen to this crisis?
I think the first thing is something that we know all along. One, as utility operators, the utility operators and us as regulators, is we should always expect the unexpected. That is one thing. The second thing I would say is that we, in times of crisis as regulators, while maintaining the need to be wise, while maintaining the principles of being just, but we ought to be willing to create an atmosphere that will, or an environment, I would say, that facilitates adaptability, innovation, and sustainability. Because these things are important if the utility is going to emerge from this crisis, from a crisis intact, as well as our customers will emerge from this crisis with the kind of quality of service that is at least meet certain minimum level of satisfaction. So I think those are the things that are important. Creating an environment that provides for adaptability, innovation, and sustainability, while at the same time being open, being alert, and expect the unexpected.
Well, thank you for those very wise closing statements. Thank you to everybody who participated in our Next Practices Live this morning. We really appreciate you taking time out of your very busy schedules, especially in these trying times, to join with us in discussions of how countries, how utilities, how regulators are adapting through all this. So for everyone, from all of us here at PURC, I want to thank Cedric for his willingness to participate. Thank all of you, and we will see you soon. Cedric, stay safe, my friend. I look forward to the day where I can shake your hand in person again.